I'm here to talk to you about shot listing, which, when it comes to shot listing, there's two very different aspects to it. The one is a purely practical application. As a director, it's one of your most important communication tools. It's a way in which we communicate with our producer, with our cinematographer, about what the shots are that we're going to require in a day, and it helps them to schedule a day to get a sense of how much time you're going to be spending at a location, to get a sense of what kind of equipment you're going to need for a particular scene, etc., etc. So it's a very useful, very important part of a director's preparation. But when we talk about shot lists, or when we talk about storyboarding, they're really the two sides of the same thing. If I give you a quick example of what a shot list is, establishing shot, wide angle shot of Joburg, early morning. Cut to wide shot alley, car parked at the end of an alley, two figures in the car. We hear the beginning of a conversation. Cut to rear view mirror. We see the eyes of our main character reflect in the mirror. He's talking, carrying on the conversation, dialogue. Cut to close-up of the person who's listening to him. Cut to our main guy talking, first time we reveal him. Cut to tight two-shot. Cut to close-up of money being handed over. Okay? That's a shot list. So it's a kind of scene that you probably recognize. It's the kind of scene that we see in a lot of different kinds of movies. And in that description, I've probably given you about 8 or 9 different shots. From your establisher, to your master shot in the alley, to your kind of special cutaway, close-up of the rear view mirror, cutaway of the money, close-up about 2 characters, intimate 2-shot. Okay, so that's 7. So that's the shot list, right? 7 different shots listed. That's the way that you can go to your DOP and you can go, okay, this is what I need for the scene, this is coverage. So that's coverage on its most basic level, all right? Storyboards are really the same thing, but they're a visual version of it. So storyboarding, little sketches, little ideas of each one of those shots. They help us a bit further. They give us an idea of the type of composition, where we want to place certain things, what we want in the foreground, what we want in the background. That's storyboarding. Again, very useful. Storyboards are useful for art directors, for DOPs, for producers, for schedulers, for ADs. It helps everybody get onto the same page in terms of what it is that we're going for, what it is that we are working together to make. For clients as well, if you're directing an advert, it's a way to kind of sell the idea. It's very difficult for people to imagine what your movie is going to look like before you make it. And often we have to convince people to give us a lot of money to go out and make something without anything to show for ourselves. So it's another way in which we can kind of communicate the idea, the sense of our story before we go and make it. All right, education tool. Guys, there's no set rule, and this is what I'm going to get to very, very soon, that there's absolutely no right or wrong way to do it. It's all about you, it's all about the filmmaker, I'm not going to say you, but the director or the filmmaker's vision for the thing and what he needs to communicate it. So, for example, I work a lot with a cinematographer, Villinell, and with the two of us, it's often not necessary to make anything too detailed because we've worked together so much that we have a kind of shorthand. We understand how the other person thinks. We've made a lot of shots in the past so we can reference work that we've done before. We have a lot of movies in common so we can talk about things that often makes it not necessary to make up a shot list or a storyboard. So other times when you're working with large crews, when you've got very technical setups, when your time is very limited, then it's essential to have very detailed shot lists / storyboards. The two don't always have to make both. Sometimes a shot list is enough. Sometimes you need shot lists and storyboards. Sometimes only a storyboard will do it. It depends on the project and it depends what you're doing. And only you can say what you're going to need. You in your mind have an idea of what it is that you want to create, and you need to decide what tools you use to communicate that to other people. That's shot listing and that's storyboarding. I want to get on to what for me is the second and very important part of shot listing. And that is the creative intention. So we all go out and we write a story, right? We make a script, we make a story. Maybe it's a love story. Guy meets girl, guy falls in love with girl, guy fucks up and makes the girl angry, girl rejects guy has to make it up to girl, guy manages to make it up to girl, guy proposes to girl, guy and girl get married. Story, okay? Story. But then it comes to the question of, how do I tell the story? And what is my point of view when I'm telling the story? The point of shot lists, guys, and the point of using a camera to tell your story is not just to show what is happening. If there's one thing that I can communicate to you today, or if there's one thing that you remember, then it's this. Shot lists help us to use the camera to tell the story. So, let me give you an example. When you're watching a soap, when you're watching a Sidingo, all the camera is doing is it's showing the action. You've got one line, you've got a master shot, you've got a angle and a reverse angle. That's it. So the camera isn't doing anything or isn't doing much to help to tell the story. But when you are working with a single camera on location, it's a very, very different story. For a director or for any filmmaker, the camera is probably the most important tool to use to help to tell the story. So let's think about our sequence in the alley. There's 100 different ways in which we can cover it. I gave you the most obvious, most generic kind of coverage. What you might do is you might shoot the whole scene from above, bird's eye view, one shot. Or you might use the same shot list I had, but decide I want to be tracking on every single shot, or I want every shot to have a certain kind of movement to it. Or you can say, I want to be inside the car, handheld, and shoot the whole thing as if there's a passenger in the back seat that we never see. So 100 million infinite different ways to shoot the action, to show what's going on. So this brings us to the very, very, very important question, which is, how do I decide? How do I decide what my scene's going to look like, what angles I'm going to use, what angles I'm not going to use, what's going to be important and what's going to be less important? And this is where the work of a director and of filmmakers, writers, producers as well, this is not exclusively for directors, this is where it becomes very important. This is how you start setting your film apart. This is when we hear people talking about a filmmaker's voice or a point of view of a film, this is what we're talking about. Showing us the action in a very specific way. So for example, I can storyboard or I can shot list to foreground a specific character. I can say, okay, I want to tell my boy meets girl story, but I want to tell it entirely from the boy's perspective. I want to be living on his shoulder. I want to empathize with him completely. I want to be traveling on his shoulder and see the world through his perspective the entire movie. So I'm going to shoot my coverage, close-ups, intimate, various angles on him, and show everything that he's looking at. Shoot everything else as a POV, for example. Or I can say, I'm not so much interested in the boy's character or the girl's character. I'm interested in showing the fact that they come from a kind of working class background. I want to show the fact that this love story is playing out in a hard, tough, financially struggling community where beautiful things happen despite the fact that life is a struggle. Then I'm going to spend a lot more time showing my location, showing the world in which the story is playing out. I might have, for example, a critical scene in the movie, the boy and the girl have a big fight. I might decide to shoot that next to a garbage dump and frame up for the garbage dump, have boy and girl, two tiny little figures in the background. Wow, 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 we're hearing the whole fight, but we're seeing the environment, we're seeing the garbage dump. So do you see what I'm getting at? I'm using my shots, or I'm using my camera to help to tell the story. I'm using the camera to direct the audience's eye to certain things. In other words, I want you, the audience, to look at my story in a certain light. either from a particular character's point of view or from the point of view of the filmmaker, which is to go look at the story, but look at the world in which it's playing out. So this brings us back to this idea of using the camera to tell story, using the camera to give us a particular point of view on the story. And this is the crux of the director's craft. Film is a visual medium. The story does not just exist on the page. The story resides in the way in which the story is told. Good question. It's not in the treatment. Treatment is broad. Treatment gives you the bigger picture. In the treatment, you might say, I want to show the socioeconomic context of the story. I want to show the way in which love and human drama plays out against the backdrop of economic hardship. That could be in your treatment. But in the treatment, you're not going to go, I'm going to shoot the fight up against a wide shot of the garbage dump. That's for your shot list. So your treatment is the big concept, is the big idea. Shot list is how you execute the big idea in the way that you choose and select your shots. I'll give you an easy example. I was watching an episode of Dexter last night, and there was this great piece of comedy where the episode starts with a cop interrogating this young girl, and it was like, have you ever used drugs before? No, I haven't. What about 6 years ago at this party? Oh yeah, maybe I did have a hit of coke. Well, did you or didn't you? I don't know. Why are you asking me this? Conversation, close up. Close up, close up, close up, close up. All of a sudden, camera is on the girl who's being interrogated. Camera pulls wide, and we're in Dexter's living room, and we see it's Dexter's sister interrogating a potential babysitter. So what looks like an interrogation room scene is suddenly revealed to be a scene where the poor babysitter is being interrogated for a job. So there's a bit of comedy there. It's a gag. That's a beautiful example of using camera to tell story. What the camera is doing is it's leading the audience down a certain path, making us think that it's one kind of scene, and then halfway through the scene, revealing that something else entirely is going on. So there we see a great example of how the director is choosing to interpret the script. On the page, it's just a conversation between a potential employer and a potential babysitter. On screen, the director is choosing to make a joke.